So welcome to the 9th edition of the Wage Roundtable series on young polar researchers, perspectives, challenges, and insights, which has been organized by Wage students Ayşe Akyıldız, Manuel Shachat, Jake Cohen, Vicky Jelinet, Mirka Olila, Polina Sayediskaya, and Geneviève Vachon. We are pleased to have the opportunity to have these discussions with you all. Thank you for being here. Mirka and Polina will be our facilitators today, so I'll pass the floor to them.
Hey, thank you, Karen, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at this roundtable, as Karen told you, organized by us, Wage students. We named this roundtable as Young Polar Researchers, Perspectives, Challenges, and Insights. And today we have 5 panelists, as already being mentioned, but I'll say it again. So the panelists are Ayşe, Jake, Vicky, Geneviève, and Manuel from different disciplines and stages of their studies. And we have also 2 facilitators, of which I am happily one of them, and Polina is the other. So my name is Mirka Olila. I am a Finnish doctoral researcher at the Aleksanteri Institute, University of Helsinki, and I am also a visiting researcher at the Arctic Center, University of Lapland. Now, as you might have read from the roundtable abstract we did in cooperation, today we want to share experiences and perspectives of early career researchers, us, working across different circumpolar regions. Through today's discussion, we will explore some of the challenges we face, the lessons we have learned, and the successes we have achieved, while reflecting on emerging research practices and how we maybe envision the future of Northern researchers and our position and journey in it. For me, specifically, personally, this topic feels important and meaningful as we learn to share our journeys and reflect upon those, while also awakening our skills to listen to others' journeys. Sharing it's a richness. It is something I always appreciate in conversation with colleagues, and it creates a warm feeling of being in this together despite not being in the same country or even in the same discipline. And I, for example, became interested in examining different forms of power in the context of Russian indigenous Arctic, well, partly because of my family background, who had to flee their home twice due to the changing borders of Finland and the Soviet Union from below the Arctic Circle. In my PhD, I examined the mining industry on the Kola Peninsula, which is in Russia, and the power relations entangled with the development processes between the extractivist companies and the Kola Sami community. But that's enough of me. The structure of today's discussion is the following. So we will start with introduction. So each of us will go through our background. I just did mine, from which we will then continue directly to the questions we have created for ourselves. And in the end, we will open the floor for you guys to join the discussion if you feel like joining. And before I hand over to my colleague Polina, I would like to remind everyone in this space that we respect the principles of a safe space during this discussion by being open-minded, encouraging, and supportive, and by giving space during our contributions. And feel free to turn on your cameras or not, however suits you. We will have them on. So, Polina, feel free to continue from this opening of the 9th Wage Roundtable.
Thank you, Mirka. Торова. Маньоми Полина, мань тензу всядей, мань ненеце округ хадангадам. Hello, everybody. I introduced myself in the Nenets language, my native language. My name is Polina. My last name is Siadei or Siadeiskaya, and I am from the Nenets Autonomous Okrug or district in Russia. It's the Russian part of the Arctic, and I'm happy to welcome you from here, from my homeland now. I'm very lucky to be with my family now. And I'm doing a PhD in anthropology at the University of Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. And my research is mainly with and for the well-being of my people, and I'm doing socio-cultural research mainly. I want indigenous ways of knowing and being to be recognized as equal and respected as equal with Eurocentric ones. And I'm very happy that we have this space today and this conference for young researchers, and only for us. It's very special, being facilitated by us, and it's it's a very special event for me. And I want us to remember always that Arctic is home to many, many indigenous peoples. I feel like we started in a good way today. It's a safe space, and I want us to proceed in a good, kind, and respectful way. And now we ask our panelists to introduce yourselves. How did you get interested in the Arctic research, and what is your research on? Whoever wants to start.
Je peux y aller. Je vais parler français pour mon introduction. Ça se peut que je parle anglais pendant la conversation, mais moi, je suis Geneviève Vachon. J'étudie à l'Université Laval en santé publique, en promotion de la santé. Avant de commencer ma maîtrise, j'étais professionnelle en santé et services sociaux au Nunavik, dans la région du Grand Nord du Québec. Je travaillais principalement dans le système de protection de l'enfance. C'était donc une expérience qui a été très riche, mais très difficile en même temps, étant donné l'histoire de colonisation, étant donné ce que je peux représenter, moi, dans un milieu autochtone et inuit. Et je vivais beaucoup d'impuissance parce que justement, je trouvais on essayait d'appliquer le système de santé et de services sociaux tel qu'on le connaissait, nous, les non-inuits, au sud du Québec. Et je trouvais que c'était pas du tout adapté à la réalité et aux besoins de la population. Je trouvais qu'on rejouait même l'histoire de colonialisme à quelque part. Et c'est pour cette raison-là que j'ai décidé de prendre un pas de recul et d'aller étudier en santé publique pour mieux comprendre quelle est la conception de la santé et du bien-être propre aux Inuits et comment on pouvait mieux agir à un niveau populationnel. Donc, voilà, c'est comme ça que j'ai décidé d'étudier en santé publique et je m'intéresse au savoir inuit, à la conception de la santé et du bien-être des Inuits et je m'intéresse particulièrement à ça à travers l'alimentation traditionnelle qui est un pilier pour leur culture et leur bien-être. Merci.
Thank you, Geneviève. Okay, the next panelist.
I can go. Hello, everyone. My name is Manuel Charette. I am a research assistant for WAGE based at the University of Ottawa. I work under the supervision of Professor Sophie Thériault. My background is not the most traditional one. I've just completed a master's in anthropology at U Ottawa, and I have an undergraduate degree in law. And I am starting next fall a master's degree in law. So basically, my research interest aims to link legal studies with social sciences in a context where traditionally law is seen as a autonomous and independent object. I got interested in Arctic issues mainly because I was hearing from a Southern perspective two discourses that seemed contradictory to me. The first one was the Arctic being a region of vulnerability and fragility in light of climate change, and the other line of discourse was the Arctic as being a treasure chest that is slowly opening up with climate change access to all sorts of new resources. And so I'm interested in navigating these tensions and see how they are negotiated institutionally and how they are both influenced by and influence attempts of institutional changes in the Arctic with regards to Inuit self-determination struggles. And so what I'm interested in looking at more specifically is how the ventures to balance ecological and economical ventures reflect how power dynamics are being reshuffled or reproduced with regards to the interaction between the Canadian state and Inuit people. So I'm excited for this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuel.
I can go. Thanks, Manuel. My name is Jake Cohen, and I'm an Alaska Sea Grant Fellow based at the University of Alaska, living in Kodiak, Alaska. And kind of like Manuel, I have a little bit of a different path than some of the other folks in the panel. So I got a master's in biological oceanography at the University of Alaska in 2022, and I was studying phytoplankton and microbial community structure in the Gulf of Alaska and Bering Sea. So I was living and working in a region that's considered to be the subarctic. And we were doing a lot of fascinating research, but one thing that kind of concerned me during a lot of it was that we weren't really collaborating with indigenous people who have lived and used the resources of the land and waters around Alaska for thousands of years. So after finishing my master's degree, I got a 2-year fellowship opportunity working with WAGE member Dr. David Holland in anthropology at the University of Alaska. And so I spent the last 2 years working on climate adaptation and kind of combined Western and indigenous research on oceanographic factors in the Gulf of Alaska and the Bering Sea. So working with tribal members to see how their environment's changing, and then how we can use both novel adaptation methods and traditional ways of Arctic life to kind of help communities adapt and thrive in a changing system. So really helping to kind of integrate some of my natural science background with on-the-ground kind of research and collaboration with tribal members in Alaska. And it's been great to work with the WAGE group during my time in the project, and I'm looking forward to being here today. So thank you.
Thank you, Jake.
I can go next. Je vais y aller en français. Je vais faire comme Geneviève, je vais y aller en français pour l'introduction, mais peut-être en anglais pour les prochaines questions. Donc, bonjour à tout le monde. Je suis très heureuse d'être ici. Je suis Vicky Gélina, étudiante à la maîtrise en sociologie à l'Université Laval. Puis, je travaille également comme économiste principale dans une firme de consultants qui est détenue, qui est une firme métier qui produit des services statistiques et analytiques là, au gouvernement puis aux organisations autochtones à travers le Canada. Moi, j'ai fait un retour aux études en 2020, donc j'ai fait mon baccalauréat en 2014 en économie puis en sciences politiques, avec une mineure en études russes aussi à l'Université McGill. Puis en 2020, j'ai décidé de retourner à l'école. J'avais toujours eu en tête de faire une maîtrise, mais j'ai commencé avec des micro-programmes en études nordiques et en études autochtones par intérêt personnel. J'avais la curiosité d'apprendre plus sur notre histoire, sur l'histoire coloniale, sur tout ce qu'on n'avait pas appris à l'école, en fait, quand j'avais grandi. Puis, cet intérêt-là s'est vraiment développé puis m'a amené, en fait, même à un changement de carrière. J'étais dans les comptes économiques internationaux, donc c'est vraiment je travaillais sur des produits statistiques macroéconomiques, là, vraiment à très haut niveau. Puis, j'ai lentement fait mon changement vers faire des équipes où on travaille plus sur les données sociales, donc sur les données sur le Nord canadien. Puis ça m'a amené après ça là, à travailler à Relations autochtones, puis au poste que j'ai aujourd'hui, parce que plus j'apprenais sur l'histoire, plus j'avais envie de mettre mes connaissances puis mes compétences à contribution pour les communautés, mais pour vraiment, sans imposer rien, mais vraiment pour que ça soit du travail qui soit, je vais le dire en anglais, là, relevant and meaningful pour les communautés dans leur journey vers l'autodétermination. Donc, c'est un peu ça mon background. Puis, quand j'ai travaillé à Relations couronnes autochtones, j'ai eu vent un peu à distance la façon dont les feux de forêt avaient été gérés pour certaines communautés. La difficulté que les communautés, certaines communautés autochtones des territoires du Nord-Ouest, par exemple, avaient eu la difficulté à recevoir du support adéquat puis à temps. Donc, ça m'a amené vers la recherche là, que je veux faire pour mon mémoire. Moi, je suis encore au tout début de mon parcours de recherche. Je viens de terminer ma scolarité, donc je commence vraiment à focaliser principalement sur mon mémoire qui je veux étudier dans le fond les inégalités là, qui sont l'impact de ces événements majeurs de feux de forêt sur les inégalités qui peuvent subsister dans les communautés. Donc, c'est un peu ça pour mon parcours.
Thank you, Vicky.
I can go next. Hello, everyone. My name is Aisha Akildas. Thank you for having me in this panel. I'm a PhD student in rural sociology and demography at the Pennsylvania State University in the US. I work under the advisement of Dr. Guangqing Chi here, and also collaborate with the WAGE researcher, Dr. David Holland. My interest in Arctic research started out of a deep concern for people who experience large-scale changes, and I've always been drawn to questions about inequality, environment, and displacement. But the Arctic especially is stood out to me as a place where these forces are converging in a very powerful way and also visible and urgent way. And I was struck by how this climate change is not just an environmental issue, but it's also a social issue. It's an issue of accessing food, maintaining cultural practices, and deciding whether individuals can stay in their homelands. And I became especially interested in how these changes affect decisions around mobility. I do research in environment and migration relationships. So I'm particularly interested in who leaves, who stays, and what kind of pressures influence those decisions, and what is the impacts of these decisions on the community or on the people that stay in the community. But beyond these academic questions, I would also have to say that what currently pulls me and continuously to this research is the people that I've met throughout my research process, the community members and the indigenous leaders who are navigating these changes with a lot of resilience and care. These stories that I learned in the field really challenged me to think differently about climate justice, and I realized that research in the Arctic couldn't be just about documenting a loss. It's also about uplifting stories of resilience, uplifting the stories of adaptation, and creating a vision for future together. So that's what keeps me invested in this research, not just the questions that I have, that I bring from the South, or try to co-create with the indigenous communities, but also the relationships and the personal responsibility that I feel that comes with this kind of work. So that's a kind of short summary of my interest. And my current work looks at the interrelations between climate, food, and migration.
Thank you, Aisha. And now we can move to the next question.
Thank you, everyone. It is always interesting to start with the interactions and the background, because you see that there are similar things that binds us together from different perspectives and from different sides of the world. So it is kind of like a round, it's a circle, and then we are part of the circle and it becomes one. But the first question that we created was, or is, that what are the important elements to consider when doing research in the Arctic, in your opinion? And I think we could start with Vicky this time.
Thank you, Mirka. There's, I think, and I'll try to keep it brief because I think we all have something to share about this for this one. But there are so many points that are important when working in the Arctic and in indigenous communities. I think probably respect for me is one of the most important of them. So respect for different forms of knowledge that might differ from our own, respect for other worldviews, for different realities. And with this comes positionality. So recognizing recognizing where we're coming from and the potential privileges that we have depending on our position and how they're shaping how we might see the world, approach our research, and interact with others, because it will be part of every step of the research that we'll be doing. And this is also a reason why involving the communities early on the research stages is so important, to ensure that their views, their visions, their priorities can be fully integrated into all aspects of it, and that the research is not just benefiting the researcher. I think also reflecting and recognizing our position comes with adaptation to the different realities, and to be open and respectful to those different realities. It can be also in a lot of different aspects of the research. Like an example that comes to mind is just if you're doing interviews, to be comfortable with silence and not always try to fill the void when talking, because the silence might be part of the communication that and can translate information that you want to have. So just being aware of those differences and accepting and adapting to them. I think also accepting the fact that we will make mistakes, and at the same time also not to put the burden on the communities or the persons you're interacting with to make you feel good or to reassure us afterwards. So really recognize our mistakes, but then move on and try not to repeat them, and learn from those as much as we can. And also come in the communities, come in the field where you're working with a strong desire to learn from others, but also at the same time respecting people's boundaries, because it's important for us as researchers to come in, but do our research first and not expect the communities to fully educate us on their reality. So do our homework before going. And then maybe for me, especially for my research subject when studying inequalities, I think it's also important to understand where the community wants to be at, what their strengths are, and not just assume that they wish to be at the same level as non-Indigenous communities, which is often what they're compared for when we study inequalities. And then for some aspects of well-being, there won't be any comparators with non-Indigenous communities. We can think of language vitality, cultural participations. They're not the type of indicators where there will be metrics, so they might be a bit left on the side in those studies. And I will close on this because I want to leave others the time to speak as well. But I once read in the book Indigenous Statistics, a Quantitative Methodology. It's by Chris Henderson and Maggie Walter, that the strengths of Indigenous communities are often the weaknesses of non-Indigenous communities. So we can think of the care for the environment, the strong community and family ties. And because they are the weaknesses of the non-Indigenous communities, they're often left out when studying inequalities, because it puts the non-Indigenous folks in a darker light. And I think it's something too that's important to keep in mind. So overall, I'll leave the floor to someone else.
Thank you, Vicky. Jake, would you mind to go next?
Yeah, of course. And yeah, kind of following on that, as I said previously, I kind of came to my Arctic research career as an oceanographer. And a lot of times when you're doing oceanographic work, sometimes you're 100 or more kilometers offshore, and it can be easy to forget that the entire land and waterscape of the Arctic is traditional Indigenous homelands. And a lot of times when you're kind of doing like natural science work, that's not the kind of scope of your research. You're kind of looking at these really kind of specific ecological or kind of climatic questions, and kind of not always kind of cooperating and engaging with the communities whose waters you're working on. But I also think that even though this is an area that's been overlooked in the past, it's an area that can lead to a lot of really helpful kind of collaborations in the future. One great thing about natural science is we do generally have a pretty large funding base and a lot of really exciting infrastructure available to us. I know a lot of us were on the Admixon up in Canada last year and kind of were able to see that. I think that a lot of areas we're starting to look toward a new paradigm where natural scientists are working with communities whose waters they're working on, and thus able to kind of incorporate native issues and native questions about their land into their research, and help it to kind of leverage the power, both in terms of infrastructure, knowledge bases, and funding sources to be able to really kind of help Arctic communities and lead to a much more kind of cooperative and holistic knowledge of Arctic environments, which is an area that needs to be considered and is a great kind of opening for improvement in the future.
Thank you, Jake. Manuel, would you be next?
Of course. Yeah, as Vicky said, I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is positionality, especially being a researcher from the south looking upwards to the north. But also as a legal scholar, I think there's a reflection that needs to be done on the positionality of the law and the way it interacts with these regions. Bruno Latour has a concept about modern worldviews being hors sol. I'm not sure what the correct translation is in English, but being uprooted, let's say. And in many ways, the law and legal scholarship have a tendency to, see the world from above, and legal scholars can do their research only in legal texts. But I think when working with regions such as the Arctic or any region in general, you realize the materiality of the law, and that the law is not only or principally in text, but it's also lived, and it is what shapes social structures and thus environments and so on and so forth. So I think for me, like the biggest thing that popped up when I started, diving into the literature and so on is the importance to navigate this uprooting, but also this rooting perspective that the law has, and that shapes the social issues that the social and ecological issues that we are interested in. So yeah, this like double positionality between being, from above, but also being like ingrained in the social and ecological fabric is like the main takeaway for me.
Thank you, Manuel. Genevieve?
Yes. So, as Manuel and Vicky, when I was thinking about this question, the first thing that came to mind was my positionality as a researcher. Of course, I think it's the first element to consider when doing Arctic research is where you come from, what you represent, what and how it can affect the relationship and how it can affect the research and the relation with the communities. I think it's very important to start slowly, take your time to build trust and to build meaningful relationship, and not just through research, like at a human level relationship. I read this article last year written by Heather Castleton. In this article, she says, like, her supervisor asked her how come like her project is not more advanced or something like that, and she kinds of answer, and it's the title of her article. But I spent the first year drinking tea, like as if she was during a year, she was like building relationship, drinking tea with communities, and really trying to understand what they wanted, what their priority were, what their needs were. So I think it's the most important. And the second is to maintain those relationships on a long-term basis and not just go for one research and then go back home. If you want to invest time in the Arctic, I think you need to be, I think it has to be a long-term commitment. Yeah.
Thank you, Genevieve. And last but not least, Aisha, would you care to go?
Sure. I agree with all the points mentioned by the previous speakers. I think these are all great points, and I would also include them as the top priorities. So respect and knowing positionality, building trust slowly, giving back to the community, and having long-term engagement were on my list when I was thinking about this question. So thank you for explaining them in really great way. So the other things that I was thinking about is nothing is ahistorical, but especially in the Arctic context. So doing your homework before even starting this kind of work or going to the field and understanding the colonial legacies that are currently present. These could include forced relocation and the histories of resource extraction, imposed governance models, and so on. So doing your homework before going to the field, but also kind of having an open mind and forgetting some of the work that you did also in the field work. Because yes, the natural system is very complex, social system is very complex in the Arctic. We have the multi-level governance, so we do a lot of work before we even start this kind of work to understand the realities of the place. But when we go to these communities, kind of having those theoretical background in mind, we should be also open to forget some of the things we know and learn it from the people, and having a plan B, plan C, plan D, being open to change your questions, being open to change theoretical concepts that one is using is something that stood out for me during my experience in the last past years. And like the previous speakers mentioned, really respecting the time needed to do this kind of work and communicating that to your advisor or your collaborators is very important, because this kind of work takes a long time. And being transparent is important before starting this kind of work, but also during the work. So being able to speak to people about who you are, what you're trying to achieve through your research project in the field while doing this kind of work, and also when you come back to the field and give back to people. So this transparency has to be a long-term process. These are some of the things that I wanted to highlight. And last but not least, Indigenous knowledge is not just a data source. It's a governance system. It's an epistemology. So remembering that and having that relationality is very important when considering conducting Arctic work.
Thank you, Aisha. Thank you, everyone. I think we are ready to go to the next question.
Yes, and before moving, I just wanted to add some things. I really enjoyed the answers, and I was writing down some things, and wow, I'm also learning, and I like these ideas, how we can all share. And I also want to add that what I think is very important in this question is always remember not to do harm when you're going to communities, and be informed about the trauma. Not only history, but history includes this trauma, but specifically be informed about trauma, about generational trauma and other things. Like, for example, in our community, we have some issues, and if researchers don't understand, it can be problematic and cause more harm that already exists. So I know it's hard, it's very hard, it's hard topic, and I think if a person is not ready, it's better not to go. But yeah, we need to inform ourselves and be ready. And also, I was thinking about small practical things when going to the Arctic, to communities, such as, for example, when we maybe underestimate them. For example, what to wear. Like, I was part of some trips where researchers, for example, would wear very fancy clothes, and it's sometimes can cause deteriorate existing problems, when people might feel not good enough, when fancy researchers in fancy clothes come, for example. Or, for example, the question of bringing alcohol to communities. To me, my opinion is there should be no alcohol when you're doing research in the Arctic. I mean, when you meet indigenous people specifically at the meetings with people, even though some indigenous peoples themselves, they would disagree with me and bring alcohol and want alcohol at the meetings. But my opinion is very strong, and I have very strong opinion in this question, like no alcohol meeting indigenous people. Also, there are some ethical dilemmas, especially we as young people might face. For example, when you go to community and someone who you are building relationship with or asks you for money, for example, what do? Like, you need to think and be ready and think who you can talk to, your supervisor, or what would you do? We are students, we can say always like, I'm sorry, I'm a poor student, but also sometimes it's not the case. And I just mean that there can be different dilemmas. Or if you meet someone you build relationship with in the community, and then you see they face mental health crisis, what do you do? So those things I feel like are important, and the situations can be very different. And I feel like those conversations are important to have, like in advance or during the field work or something, and have a trusting relationship between the researchers and supervisors and colleagues. So those are things I wanted to add. Okay, so I think now we can move to the next question. Okay, what are the challenges you are or have been facing in your research? Shall we start with Manuel?
Yeah, thanks. Well, it echoes pretty much what we've just talked about and what you've just mentioned, Polina. I think the biggest challenge is inherent to the positionality is having the tools to navigate alterity, especially when we're navigating as non-Indigenous peoples in Indigenous contexts. And I think it's even more true with regards to law. In the Arctic, when we study or evaluate the topics of like institutional change, it comes with the questions of Inuit self-determination and Inuit self-government, and the question of alterity pops up in a context where the colonial institutions are still very strong and still reproduce the legal and the social context even today. Even like if we go to the basics of basics, there are eternal debates on what constitutes law, and I will spare you the debates, but essentially the main distinction is that law is something of civilization, so something of Western society. That obviously is evolving, but what I'm trying to say is that when you study such topics, this heritage is carried on, and you have to tackle these questions. And even though you have the most, you operate in good faith and you have the most open will, there are still things that you will not be able to grasp. So what do you do when you are not able to grasp, for example, the extent to which Inuit legal orders, for example, has an impact on the land? And there is this trap that is visible, in my opinion, in law, but also like in doing research, is to try to translate everything into your own frame of mind. So I think that's one of the main challenges. Glenn Coulthard talks about the politics of recognition in Canada. And in many ways, when legal pluralism is taken into account from an institutional perspective, it is taken into account when it's translatable into what it means to structure a society, for the example of Canada. So I think the biggest challenge is to be able to navigate this alterity and to recognize it as such, but being like sensitive that there are things that won't be able to be translated, and have tools to still allow for these spaces of non-correspondence. I would say I think that's the biggest challenge.
Yes, thank you, Manuel. I also have legal background, so all those things you talk about are very resonate with me in many ways. Okay, let's move on to Jake.
Yeah, thank you, Polina. And I think kind of one challenge I see being an early career researcher is that kind of like one thing that kind of comes along with it is that you don't have a lot of time kind of working with communities in the field. So I did a 2.5-year master's project. I'm doing a 2-year fellowship working with communities in Alaska, but a couple 2 years projects is not enough to really create long connections with communities. I know some places in rural Kodiak Island, people will be hired on for a short-term position, and people will just tell them come back when you've been here a year, just because a lot of community members are used to kind of a lot of early career scholars kind of cycling through and then after a year or two not coming back. And I think everybody, of course, is well-meaning, and it's just the nature of kind of jumping through a lot of short-term positions in an early career Western institution that you don't always have the time to kind of make long-term connections to specific people. I know one way that I've helped to remedy this is really by trying to always kind of center my work with people like Dr. David Holan, who has had decades working with these communities in Alaska and does have these long-term relationships. And I'm very always upfront about the fact that I'm here for a 2-year fellowship. I'm hoping to use my oceanographic and natural science knowledge to help with climate adaptation plans, but I'm always make sure to kind of center my positionality and kind of help to further the relationship that David has to ensure that we're continuing to work in good faith with communities in Alaska. One second point I just want to mention, speaking as a student from the United States, is that the current governmental administration is somewhat hostile to funding both for climate research and kind of research involving Indigenous people and kind of things involving inequality as well. And I don't want to get too much into it, but facing shifting funding landscapes and different research priorities from funding agencies is a challenge that many of us are facing now and we'll have to face over the next few years. But of course, there's a lot of wonderful people working on it who are trying to see it through, but should bear mentioning.
Yeah, thank you, Jake. Very, very important points. Yeah, and little time. Yes, I can't even imagine like if I didn't have relationship with my community before, like from my childhood, basically. I don't know how I would do it in 2 years during the masters. Yeah. Okay. Geneviève?
Oui, merci Paulina. Je vais répondre à cette question-là en français parce que les nuances sont importantes, je trouve. En fait, Manuel et Jake y ont touché un petit peu. Ce qui est difficile parfois, c'est d'avoir à naviguer avec les contraintes institutionnelles qui ont des réalités très différentes de la réalité des communautés et qui sont parfois même pas au courant vraiment de la réalité des communautés. Et donc, ça revient aux chercheurs de faire de l'éducation, carrément. Si je peux donner un exemple, ça serait pour, par exemple, les comités d'éthique. Nous, on a voulu vraiment, dans notre projet, respecter les principes de propriété, d'accès aux données par les communautés. Et donc, on voulait absolument on voulait être copropriétaire des données avec les communautés. On voulait qu'ils puissent avoir accès aux données, qu'ils puissent décider ce qu'ils allaient en faire et peut-être poursuivre les recherches sur les données. Et c'était à leur demande. Et donc, ça a été quand même beaucoup de discussions à faire avec le comité éthique que je dois remercier par ailleurs parce que c'était un comité d'éthique c'était une première pour ce comité d'éthique particulier-là. Ils ont fait preuve d'une grande ouverture, mais ça a quand même été un long processus. Donc, nos institutions sont pas nécessairement encore bien. Je pense que c'est en transformation, je dois dire, mais il y a encore beaucoup de chemin à faire pour que les institutions comprennent les réalités des communautés et qu'on décolonialise nos méthodes et la façon de faire de la recherche. Donc ça, c'est un élément qui a été un peu plus difficile, disons, qui a été un défi. L'autre défi qui a été, moi, je m'intéresse dans mon projet, je m'intéressais à la conception de la santé du bien-être de différentes perspectives, la perspective des aînés, des adultes et des jeunes, parce que la population du Nunavik est une population très jeune et qui ont vécu, et c'est aussi une population qui a vécu énormément de changements dans les 60 dernières années. Donc, présentement, les elders sont les dernières personnes à être nées dans des igloos, dans des tentes, puis à avoir vraiment vécu le mode de vie semi-nomade traditionnel. Et on a nos jeunes qui, eux, sont arrivés à l'ère d'Internet, qui ont une ouverture presque infinie sur le monde. Donc, ça crée un gap générationnel. Et moi, je m'intéressais à cette perspective-là et ça a été difficile de recruter les jeunes. C'est difficile de les amener dans nos projets pour différentes raisons, je pense. C'est ça, je pense qu'ils sont vraiment en perte de repère. Quand on les amène avec les aînés, il y a tellement un gap générationnel important qui vont pas oser nécessairement s'exprimer dans leurs différences par rapport aux aînés. Puis tout ça dit en tout respect, mais c'est ça, c'est intéressant. C'est important si on veut adapter nos services de considérer la jeunesse et de considérer les différentes façons de voir, de vivre la culture, de vivre dans la région. Mais c'est ça, j'ai eu de la difficulté à les rejoindre, les jeunes, et je suis encore en train de réfléchir à comment je vais pouvoir les rejoindre plus particulièrement dans mes recherches futures.
Thank you, Geneviève. Yes, it resonates with me a lot with our people too, because we also have a big generational gap and we still have full-time nomads, reindeer herding. Yes, and then we have young people who oftentimes don't want to live in the tundra. And for multiple reasons, different reasons though. Sometimes some people want to be in the tundra, but it's the question of respect or status or money or like all different questions. And I'm also studying this, and it's very, very interesting how it intersects with what you're saying. about the other part of the world. Aisha, would you like to continue?
Yeah, thank you, Paulina. I agree with the points of time crunch resources as a young researcher going into communities and doing this kind of work. My main challenge is not being based in the community, being from the South, and not being able to talk to people as much as I want or visit the sites in person. Unfortunately, because we're young researchers, we're not the best. We're still learning how to write these very competitive grants and get grants for ourselves from institutions, and that is only normal. But that also means that it gives us some kind of vulnerability too, because we're often research assistants working under our PIs or so forth. That means that we usually don't have much power over the resources that we have or have access to, or power over the time. So that means that to be able to do this kind of work at a very early stage in our career, we have to do a lot of communicating with our collaborators and communicating with them the amount of time that this kind of work takes and the amount of preparation that is needed to do this kind of work. So that's my main challenge. It also means that we often gain the trust through others. We also lose trust through others as well. So being dependent on other researchers to start our careers and start our first research in a region means that we carry the decisions made by others. That means we carry the successes that are made by others, but we may also carry the past mistakes of previous generations of scholars carry. So that can be sometimes stressful. When we introduce ourselves, people often ask, who are you? Which institution are you coming from? Who you are working with? And so on and so forth. So we don't go there as a, this blank page, a new scholar. So that means that we have to navigate that kind of situation and prove our good intentions. So yeah, we carry a lot of things. And as a sociologist, I often think about doing qualitative versus quantitative work too, because when a student in my department or in this kind of program starts their studies in their master's program or PhD, they often think about, should I do qualitative or quantitative work? And this kind of academic incentives that we have usually push students to do more quantitative work. Not to say that quantitative work is less valuable or less respectable or anything like that. However, it may be easier to get secondary data and not leave your home and conduct a work. It can be more feasible given the time crunch that we have. So there's an kind of institutional incentive. It's a very academic level incentive to do quantitative work. For us, young scholars who would like to do interdisciplinary work, community-driven work, or transdisciplinary work, that means we have to take some risk for the type of work that we want to do. Because we're passionate, we often choose to go with this route and do qualitative work, talk to people, but that also brings some risk. That means that we have to navigate the timelines that we have as, master's or PhD students, like Jake mentioned. That means that we have to make sure we can do this work. If something comes up, if we cannot collect the data that we need to collect to do this kind of work, then it risks our career. But we're very happy to take the risk because we're very passionate. So if there's anything that I wanted my collaborators or the participants to know, that would be that we're taking this risk, personal risk, and we are loving to do this thing. It's the passion that we have that makes us do this kind of work. And another point is the research fatigue in the communities. So collecting qualitative data means that we may contribute or we may suffer from the already existing research fatigue in these regions. So another benefit of doing quantitative work is not harming, but potentially not understanding the issues deeply. So we have to also navigate this research fatigue.
Yes. Thank you, Aisha. Yes. Very important points. All right. Vicky?
Thank you. Thank you all. I think so far my main issue has been to respect my own calendar, my own schedule. But no, jokes apart, I don't have yet, because I'm just at the beginning in my research journey. I haven't been facing that many challenges yet, but I wanted to share a story related to work. It was research. It was not academic research, but it was research for work. And we went in a community earlier this winter to meet, to do engagement and to gather information on traditional land use. And one of the challenges that we faced is that because 3 of us were non-members from the community, elders were not open to share their knowledge with us because they had a history of white people, because we were 3 white persons coming in the community, gathering information, and then this information being used in a way that was harmful to the community. And even though the project itself was initiated by the community, we faced this challenge in gathering the information. So this is an issue a challenge that I can see could happen in my research, because there's going to be a qualitative aspect of it, and the topic of it is also can also be very heavy for certain individuals who will have gone through those extreme wildfire events. So that experience was really educative for me, and how to respect those boundaries. I think it also relates to a few other items that were mentioned. Like it relates to the time crunch. We didn't have that much time to spend in the community, so we didn't have the time either to build the relationship with people who would share the knowledge with us. So all those, I think it's something I might be facing in my research as well. So just wanted to share this.
Yeah, thank you, Vicky. Yeah, and I was imagining, as you were saying, I was just thinking, what if it happened here in my community and someone came, and our people would not trust like those people who come. No time to build relationship, just come and especially
Exactly.
elderly people.
Exactly. And it was important not to push for the information either. Respect that boundary and not try to have people share knowledge that they were not ready to share yet. So
Yeah. Do you think it was important, or it was possible to hire someone from the community to work with you?
Yes, yeah. So there were members from the community with us, so we were working in collaboration with them. But they had offered as a solution after for them to do the engagement with elders, and then share what was acceptable for them to share with us afterwards. But yes, we were with a few community members, but we still have that barrier in obtaining the knowledge, which is very understandable given the history and the harms that were done.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this story. Yeah, now we can move to the next question.
Yes, time is flying. I just wanted to add that to these challenges because, as I mentioned in the beginning, I study the Russian indigenous Arctic. We all know what's going on right now with research concerning Russia. And that's a huge challenge of how we continue talking about things that are evolving there, and what is the safe way, and what kind of data do we use, and how do we access this data, and how do we keep people safe, including ourselves. And these are big challenges, and I wish we would have more, not here, but in general, more discussions about this. And I'm very happy about the book. I also contributed. One editor is here as well, Georg Fondal, The Fractured North. The final part of the series was exactly about this moving forward, and it was very insightful to read everyone else's chapters as well. So the next question would be that what are your insights from your research? And Genevieve, would you care to start with this one?
Yeah, sure. I will be brief, and I guess I will say the most important insight of my research was, it was very important for me when I started my project to use participatory methods, to use decolonizing approach, to work with the community, to really take time to learn about their knowledge, to co-produce knowledge together. That was my ideal. It was a long-term process. My master's been lasting forever, but but my insight is that's the way to do research in the Arctic, like the way it's the more respectful way and the way that is the more beneficial to the communities. And I think my deep down, my deep motivation to do research is to understand how well my starting point, my question is what is health and well-being for Inuit and how can we improve and favor it? And I think that the process of research in itself, the way we did it, decolonizing method, working together, is in itself health promoting, and we can reconcile through that type of research process. I think it's my best insight or most important insight in my project. Thank you.
Thank you, Genevieve. Decolonizing methods, it's so important. And I feel like in our circles, it's very well known, but when we step out, it actually is not, which sometimes for me is a surprise. But we also have to remember and remind us that it's not yet as used as it should be. But Aisha, would you like to answer this question?
Yeah, thank you, Mirka. And one of my important insight from the ongoing research that I've participated in is that a few keywords stood out to me as I was reading, data or survey data or interviews that I've been listening to in the past years. And these keywords are home, family, ancestors, identity, and community. So these words come up a lot and makes me think in terms of my research about climate, food, and migration is the importance of what in the theory we call place attachment or sense of community or sense of place. These things come a lot in the data. So one of my important insight then would be migration often is not a first choice, and people are deeply connected to their lands and the community. So that's my takeaway.
Thank you, Aisha.
How do you see the future of your research? Jake, do you want to go first?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Polina. Yeah, so as I mentioned, I have a 2-year fellowship with Sea Grant, and that fellowship's going to be actually ending in October. And it's been a really great experience to learn how to use kind of natural science and oceanography to kind of really kind of work on the front lines with Arctic communities working on climate adaptation and facing climate change related issues. And going forward, I'd like to kind of continue kind of a collaborative and interdisciplinary research track where I'm using kind of natural sciences to kind of help solve community needs. I'm hoping to actually go back to grad school because you can never have too much fun, and get a PhD in the coming months. And I'm hoping to focus on species of both subsistence and cultural concern, working with Native communities to help them answer their questions about kind of change in species distributions and risk response to climate change to kind of help contribute to scientific knowledge of ecology and also kind of really help preserve kind of cultural and subsistence resources for Indigenous communities in the North.
Well, that's exciting. Congratulations. Okay. Next one is Vicky.
Thank you. I'll be brief too. I've mentioned it a few times. I'm at the very early stages, so a lot of work to do to conduct my research. I'm very excited about it. To start diving more into it, start building the connections that would be needed. I think my research. I'm planning on doing my field work in the fall, and then writing more in the winter and in the spring. And I think my research might evolve in a way that I'm not predicting it, which is also it's pretty exciting to like going in with an idea, with a question, but then not knowing how it might evolve and what the final result will be. And this whole discussion today reminds me that I need to remain open to those unpredicted changes and to make sure that it's relevant and meaningful research that I'll be doing. And I have it already, and I think we might be touching upon it a bit later, but I have the imposter syndrome every week, every day, whether it's for work or for my academic journey. So I know this is gonna stay there, and I know there's gonna be questions that come up on my position in that area. But yeah, I'm open to that. And, yeah, thank you.
Yes, this imposter syndrome. Yeah. Manuel?
Thanks. Yeah, two things. The first, I guess, is I hope to have the opportunity to bring this legal work on the ground and really, consider the materiality I was speaking about in my research. That's something I hope to do, and time will tell if that will be possible, given institutional and time and money constraints and so on. But I guess also just seeing how these social relations evolve through law in the next couple of years. There is some sort of a shift in Canada that seems to be announced in terms of trying to find ways to articulate state law and indigenous legal orders. So just like interested in how the future will unravel independently from the research and how that will in turn influence the way we do social legal scholarship.
Thank you, Manuel. Geneviève?
Oui, merci, Paulina. Donc, comment je vois le futur de ma recherche? Ben, en fait, je pense que ma maîtrise a été un bon point de départ sur comment construire mon identité de chercheuse, c'est-à-dire vraiment travailler en collaboration avec les communautés, utiliser des méthodes participatives. Mais je pense que je veux, en fait, pas je pense, mais je souhaite aller encore plus loin dans ce processus-là. C'est-à-dire que au doctorat, ce que je veux vraiment, c'est que les questions ou ma question de recherche émerge vraiment du milieu, en discussion avec le milieu, parce que bien que ça a été interdisciplinaire, mon projet de maîtrise, c'est quand même une étude qui avait été proposée par l'équipe de recherche à la communauté. Donc, c'était très collaboratif, mais c'était pas nécessairement participatif from the start. Donc, c'est ça que je veux vraiment mettre de l'avant. Et trouver la bonne place. J'ai beaucoup appris pendant ma maîtrise que chacun a à apporter Western Science et Indigenous Knowledge ou Inuit Knowledge, mais trouver vraiment la bonne balance, le, le bon équilibre entre les deux et que ce soit vraiment un partage et une coproduction de connaissances. Bref, ce serait de vraiment travailler en transdisciplinarité parce que parfois la transdisciplinarité est un peu comme un buzzword, surtout présentement, là. Puis on se dit inter, trans, tout ça, mais la vraie transdisciplinarité, c'est vraiment pas juste une intégration des connaissances autochtones, mais c'est vraiment une coproduction, puis une discussion, puis une co-construction de projet du début. Donc, oui, c'est comme ça que je vois le futur de mes recherches. Merci.
Thank you, Geneviève. Mirka, now we can move to the next question.
Yes, I think that before we open the floor to possible questions, the last question is pretty nice that you might think that what are some of the minor or major successes that you have achieved, or that the things that you are proud of yourselves? I think this is a good sort of ending to this this part of the discussion. So maybe Aisha, would you go first, and then let's continue as we did not write.
Yeah, sure. Well, I will think about the things that I'm proud of myself for, because I'm not sure if I achieved a major success yet. My research is still ongoing. But I think I realize things that I'm proud of myself, and I kind of remove myself from this academic environment and talk to people from non-academic circles and talk about my research. Or when they ask me questions and I have a better answer than a non-academic person who does not work on these issues, then I realize, oh, actually, I know a few things. And that really helps me ground and remind myself that, yes, I've been working on this for years now. Yes, I learned, although I feel pretty much like imposter, like Vicky mentioned. Those are the moments that I feel proud, and I feel passionate about continuing the type of things that I do, especially mentoring students and new PhD students or master students who are interested in Arctic research, and we have some conversations, and I give them a few tips about what to say, what not to say, all of the things that I've learned. Those are the moments that I've realized that actually I know a few things. Okay, so I feel good about that. So those are the moments that I'm most proud. But in the future, I hope this pride will come from the community members who will tell me, yes, what you're talking about makes sense to me. Yes, you are representing us, and this is and you're a useful tool for us. And when I hear that, I will be the most proud. So that's my goal.
Thank you, Aisha. And Genevieve, would you like to continue from this?
Yes. So I think that what I'm the most proud of is project really made sense to the community members. We received a lot of positive feedback from them, and I think it's the best the best proof, I guess, of that it work or it makes sense to them. But I think what I'm the most proud of is I've been presenting my research result with my colleague, my Inuk colleague. So she felt she was a coordinator on the project. She was an interpreter as well. And she came with me to present here in the South in conferences in a setting that she's not necessarily comfortable in or used to. And she was, comfortable to do it and do her part. And I think that is something that shows how she could really, elle s'est appropriée le projet. Like she was able to share. So to share the result with me. So I think that's what I'm the most proud of.
Thank you. Thank you. That was really nice to hear from both of you.
Now we can wrap up our discussion and move on to questions from the audience. I'm very happy about our discussion. Thank you, everybody, and I'm really proud of us. So I think, that's very inspiring, and I learned a lot too. And so thank you. Also, I want to say once again that Indigenous people's voices and needs and our connection to the land should be a priority and should be always at the center of research in the Arctic. Our indigenous ways of knowing and being sometimes are hard to understand from the point of view of the Eurocentric Western institutions and, worldviews. But they exist, like our indigenous ways of knowing are there, and they're very different. And I think it's very, very important to engage and try to understand them. And they're as equal, like as Eurocentric and those approaches we use in academia. And the research is always with us and for us as the stewards of the Arctic. And I believe we need more participants from the Arctic indigenous peoples, from the villages, from towns there, who are on the land, who understand and feel the land. It's also very important that indigenous people have control over the research, what to do research on, what to accept, not accept. So it's very important for us, it's our responsibility to create such a framework so that this could be practiced, like that indigenous peoples could control the research directly, those who are on the land. So these are my final thoughts. And now we're opening the floor for the questions from the audience. Please, if you want to, feel free to ask our panelists or me or Mirka. You can type in the chat, or you can just turn on your audio. While we're waiting for the questions, I still have the question from myself. What did your research process teach you as a person, as a personality? What did you learn? Maybe someone wants to share from our panelists.
I can go even though I'm a co-facilitator. Yeah. It's definitely been an interesting journey that I keep learning all the time, and I feel like while I'm going to some direction, I take steps back within myself. And I think I am quite fast person. I'm not so, I don't have patience all the time. But I have really realized during my journey with my research topic, it's been years already, that actually I do have patience. And I do care a lot. And through this care, it becomes patience. And then through patience, I keep on searching every possible way. I mean, I was talking about not being able to go to Russia, for example, and the research is very hard. But I do feel the importance of not being quiet and not entirely stop speaking about the problems that are currently evolving in the Russian Arctic, for example, the Russian indigenous Arctic. And I really cherish this patience that I found in myself, because while it is in my research and what I do, it might not be present in my other parts of my life. So this has been a very, I'm very proud of this, and it was a bit of a surprise to me as well. So yeah. And actually, to continue with Gail's question, I think we as a group we did such a wonderful job, and I think everyone participated with a joy and with listening to others, and that is a huge like a gift and a skill that is wonderful to also develop and notice that we can do this via Zoom. We are in different countries, we are in different time zones even. We have hours and hours in between us, and we still manage to do this and stay in contact. So I think this has been very nice, and I have learned from you that you are also patient with this.
Thank you, Mirka. That's so awesome. Beautiful. And also, I wanted to add from myself, when preparing for this roundtable, I really enjoyed how respectful we all are towards each other, different opinions, different approaches and personalities. And it's very beautiful process when we respect each other. And so I feel like we all are ready to go to the community, because we're just ready. And even though we have imposter syndrome, oftentimes, that's that's true. And answering my own question, for example, this what the research process taught me as a person I was when I started doing research and studying at the university, they were teaching us to switch off the feelings and think with the brain. But then I realized it really contradicts my nature, my indigenous self. And now I'm coming back to myself, connecting both the brain and the feelings and the emotions and the heart, and it feels so good, so holistic, and so real and on the ground, because now I bring all my whole, how do I even say in English, whole myself, my thoughts and also my feelings and emotions. Maybe 5 years ago I would think it's wrong, or it's like it's not objective or something, and now I understand that's the best way I can do, because now with the feelings, with a good relationship, I connect to my family and connect to our community members. That's the only way it can work with our people. So and I'm very happy I learned it as this early in my way. So I'll just keep I'm still learning and discovering all those things. But that was my discovery, connecting brain and the feelings, and not be afraid to bring it to my research. Yeah. Maybe someone else wants to add something too? We still have about 2-3 minutes.
Well, if there's no questions, I could ask some things, but if someone else wanted to ask a question, we can take the time for that. I see the comment on imposter syndrome. I find that one of the best remedies is also a good dose of humility. And when you boil down what we're doing to its essence, we ask questions for a living, and that's pretty amazing. And I'm not it's a really interesting question what research has taught me about myself, but I do know also that I've developed into my adult life has been shaped also by this endeavor of research and cultivating curiosity, and your experience with pushing down feelings and then coming back up also resonates with my background. And regarding the comment on what we've learned from each other, the thing that struck me the most is how easy it was to find resonating elements of our experiences, even though we have such different backgrounds in this era of specialization, and what you have to find your niche, but these niche still are relatable to one another's, and because of the nature of the questions we are interested in, everything sort of converges. So yeah, that was maybe one of the things I wouldn't have expected, is how relatable our experiences are. And I guess it's because we also share the distinct traits of being younger researchers in this world. But I think, yeah, the ability and facility to develop links between our experiences was something pretty interesting.
Yeah, thank you, Mila. And I agree, being humble is great. Sometimes also it's imposter syndrome can be good, because you don't come as knowing it all, and commanding or telling people what to do and how to do because you know it all. No, you just ask people, learn, and stay humble. That's very important. At least in our community, it's a big, big value to stay humble and be ready to listen and learn. Someone else to final comment, or there a question or something?
There's one hand up. So go
good.
ahead.
Yeah, there is one hand up from Iceland. I wish you had been helping me with teaching qualitative methods this spring to 60 students at the University of Akureyri. It would have been wonderful testimonies. I think I should say something. I have a cold, sorry. I was thinking about these issues that I've been running into in 4 communities I've been visiting again and again. And every time I go, I feel like I didn't know shit before. And I was wondering why. And then I realized that I had been running into situations where I became attached to key informants who turned out to be gatekeepers, so that in one community I utilized a grace period where I was sort of sneaky and would get to, go around and browse instead of becoming too attached, because eventually I realized that the community individuals were at odds with each other. And one of the communities I would describe, has been described by some as a bit of a battleground. So I wonder, I think if you haven't run into this already, then it's something one has to be open to. One ends up with a couple of informants whom you can actually speak very honestly about it all. But then only maybe because you are proactive and just say, this is how I see it, and you get them to listen to you, from your perspective, and you actually maybe do something which is maybe not always considered the thing to do to a community, that where everybody will say to you in the beginning, we are deeply committed to our community, sense of place and everything, and family, is that you talk to them about sort of what is the self-criticism within the community, what are the muted voices, where are the underdogs, where are the inequalities, and so I'm finding this actually very gratifying, because one develops then a more holistic picture that is not in focus, but slowly it becomes into focus with the help of the informers, because they actually don't mind talking. If you get to know them and develop rapport with them, then they actually really feel good about addressing these issues in inequality and some bullying, denial, and things like that. So that's just what I wanted to sort of bring out as a testimony I have at my advanced age discovered and sort of accepted more and more to dive into. So anything you might have a thought on this, young researchers?
Thank you. Thank you very much for this very, very meaningful comment. We definitely need to consider this. All right. So now it's time to finalize and end our discussion. I thank everybody once again for this very important and fruitful discussion. Thank you for joining. And yeah, it's time to close our discussion.
Great. I just, from WAGE, we want to thank all the organizers, the students, facilitators, panelists, Gail for helping. And it's been wonderful listening to your perspectives and hearing what you think and seeing where you're heading and everything. And just before we close out today, I just want to say the WAGE Roundtable series will be taking a summer break. But we'll be back in the fall, so stay tuned for some announcements late summer, early fall, TBD, but we'll definitely be up and running again in the fall. We look forward to seeing you then. So in the meantime, have a wonderful summer.